Hello, and welcome to Love Always Self. I'm Shyra.
Hi, y'all. I'm Karista, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Love Always Self. We are always so grateful to have you here. And to our newest listeners, thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to have you as well.
Yay! Ooh. So today we want to talk about deciding on perspectives, which is, we had a previous episode where we talked about shifting perspectives. During that episode, we discussed, how to kind of understand or bring yourself into a place of awareness, zooming out, things of that nature. But for today, we want to dive into actually making the decision and how that impacts you.
Mhm.
So I had this moment of truth while sleeping last night. And I like to, understand my dream states, because I believe that when we're dreaming, it's not always just a dream. It's also, you traveling kind of out of your physical self here. And, you'll interact with loved ones. Sometimes you interact with guides. And I'm pretty positive that I was interacting with the guide because they were trying to drop some truth bombs on me last night. And one of those was making an actual decision on the perspective that I have, right? And it was this aha moment that I woke up with, and I was like, Carrie, we got to talk about this. Like, this is crazy. And it was me looking at a situation. I'm not going to go into those actual details for privacy reasons, but it was me actually looking at a situation in a certain way and deciding, because I'm being conscious of the perspectives that I'm having, right? I'm looking at the moment and I'm like, okay, this situation took place and I'm going to look at it from over here. I'm going to look at it from over here. I'm going to look at it from way back here and try to get the bigger picture of it. But then I'm going to make a decision on how I want to either emotionally respond, if if it calls for that, feel towards it, or even just interacting with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's that difference between, okay, I'm mentally having a different perspective. I'm choosing, because I'm now becoming consciously aware of what I'm seeing, which is a hard thing to do when you're caught up in the moment already. But now I want to participate in this, right? And that's the thing that we can also decide. And it takes you down, and how they showed it to me was like, okay, if you decide that you want to look at it from this direction, then this is the timeline that you're going to go down. Right? If you are choosing this other perspective, here's this alternative timeline that you could decide to go down. And each one of those different directions provides you a different experience, a different learning, whatever. Lesson. Thank you. A different lesson that you want to participate in, I guess.
Yeah. First off, if you haven't listened to episode 18 on shifting perspectives, I would highly, highly recommend to check that out. And we'll link it below as well. And what you were talking about as far as zooming out, like this is a very mind-blowing, it can be step to take. So in the moment, I'm holding up a pen. In the moment, you were like looking at this pen, like it's right here in the event. Like I'm looking at it cross-eyed, right? It's touching my nose. It's in my face. And what the zooming out does is it gives us that opportunity to step back and see it and circle around it from different perspectives. And, I think it's really cool that you can see, there are times when you can see different potential outcomes related to shifting that perspective on how you're seeing things and making a decision based on those new perspectives. How
Right.
there is like this butterfly effect attached to each of those potential choices and outcomes.
Yep.
And this whole observing of self is a very important aspect to it, because that's how we learn. We also have to live through these experiences to be able to observe them. And this observation is what helps us to begin the pathway of awareness.
Yep.
And that zooming out perspective can really help us to see more options. And I think this is really valuable because we do get so zoomed in on the
Mm-hmm.
pen, and we have a hard time stepping back.
Yeah.
And in that time, it's really fast. And so it's important that you practice this, because it does get easier and these thought processes become faster innately,
Yeah.
because you're practicing them.
Yeah. And that's also something that, it's what you're saying right now is important to kind of focus in on for just a second, because when you're in that moment, I'm going to just say caught up in the moment, right? That wonderful phrase. When you are caught up in the moment, and let's say it's not, because this can be pertaining to great moments, this can be pertaining to, not so great moments. And so, per se, you're in like a situation where you're arguing with somebody, or you're not even arguing with somebody. Somebody has said something that might have triggered a response that would then cause an argument, right? You have an opportunity right then and there to just jump into that emotional trigger and respond the way you've always responded.
Mhm, mhm.
And then you have this other moment to do what Carrie was just saying with her pen, and zoom out and have a different perspective as to where this trigger is coming from for yourself, why the person might have said something to you the way they said it, all of the different aspects that could be playing a part in this now environment that you're in. And how you respond, how you decide to go about your next step is exactly what we're talking about right now. You are now
Yes.
consciously choosing to decide on a perspective that you've just zoomed out to. But it does take practice, and that is not an easy thing to do, because we are so programmed to just immediately go
Mhm,
off the cusp and have a response right then and there, or we've already created one before the person's even finished their sentence.
mhm, mhm.
That's the more common one.
We're working on deleting some of the programming
Yeah.
that has been around in us for decades. So of
Hmm.
course it's going to take time. Have a little grace with yourself.
Yeah.
And an additional thought on this is not just zooming out from your own perspective, but also zooming out and observing potential perspectives of other people too,
Yep.
and why they may be reacting the way they do.
Yep.
What kind of programming do you see them have in their lives that they continue to repeat? Can you see where potential trauma occurred to create those, even if it's, little t trauma versus big T trauma? I don't know
Yeah.
if I've ever said that before, but, the paper cuts, right?
Right.
Um, and in doing so, observing other people and their reactions, it lends us an opportunity to create more compassion for them as well. Doesn't mean we don't set boundaries or, like
Right.
stand our ground or anything like that, but we can create a little more compassion for them and their experiences while still protecting our sense of self.
And this is that entire thing about, you do have a choice. You have the power within you to make those decisions, right? Or create those different, awareness moments. It is not something that somebody else has to provide you. You can do that. yourself. And you can provide that and show that to others as well. Now, I do want to say this because this thought is popping in my head, because as we've talked about practicing this, sometimes people, when they're going into these like perspective moments, they might be quiet, which gives somebody else room to fill the gap. Right. So it'll be really important that if you do take that step back in those moments, that you communicate that, right? Say something to the nature of like, hey, I'm looking at different perspectives right now. So give me just a second while I try to like navigate that, And maybe that isn't a second. Maybe that's like, hey, I need a day. Right.
Or I need a few breaths, or can we
Right.
reconvene in 5 minutes?
Right. Right. So brace yourself though, because those that are not used to that behavior might get infuriated by you walking away from the situation, or might perceive it
as you walking away
from the situation. So it is important to communicate, use your words.
Yeah.
Make a sentence.
So I think it's the word concrete popped into my head. This idea that our beliefs and our truths and our perspectives are concrete. I would argue that many of us don't necessarily believe that when it comes down to the verbiage and thinking about that statement, but we act like it because we're so stuck in these patterns. And it's not a concrete thing. Our truths, our beliefs, our faiths, our perspectives, they are constantly evolving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is a process of evolution for our souls. So how do we make that choice?
Ooh, it is 100% dependent on what it is you want to experience next. And that is a hard pill to swallow, because most of us don't want to be in a sad state or a mad state, right? All these things are affecting your body. Remember that. Most of us don't want to do that. So when I say something like, choose your next, I almost wanted to say choose wisely.
Yeah, that's what you were going to say.
I did. I kind of wanted to say that because I found myself in a situation where I was like, this could have gone in a different direction. And that was totally up to me. I didn't have to respond that way. It didn't dawn on me until hours later that I had a choice to make in that moment. And I didn't realize that the person I was talking to was coming from a scared place. Right. But emotionally responding with stress and anger versus fear.
That's an important note, that a lot of our anger and reactionary responses are actually based out of fear. So when people are reacting in an angry way, it's usually because they've had some sort of big or little t trauma in the past that has taught them that they have to protect themselves from this.
Yeah. And especially when those micro moments are happening multiple times, it becomes macro somewhere in the subconscious.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And I do want to point out that as we make these choices for ourselves, we cannot make these choices for other people.
Yeah. That's a good point. Enforcing your perspective on others, that is also a conscious decision if you think about it, right? If you are choosing to enforce your perspective onto somebody else, that can cause conflict if they're not where you are. If they do not have that perspective within themselves to see it. Because again, they're on their own side of that mirror. Right? Solid point.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So back to how.
Oh, right. So Shyra. Got it. I have my moments too, you know? So how can you decide? How do you make that decision? For myself, I make the decision based on how I want to feel next.
Mm.
Right. I'm usually Monday to Friday in a state of stress and in a state of get it done quickly. Right.
I'd call
And
that panic.
panic. It's true. And so for me, when I'm speaking to somebody that I love and I care about, my choice is usually to want to respond in a way of care and love
Mm-hmm.
and bring about that feeling and whatever it is that I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
or how I'm acting. And so that is my choice. That is how I'm choosing my next moment. Do I want to respond compassionately? Do I want to appear or even allow them to feel that I'm understanding? So that's the direction that I'm choosing consciously to go into,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
usually. And don't get me wrong, I have my moments, right? I have my pin straight up to the nose, cross-eyed, looking straight
Yeah.
at it moment,
Yeah.
right? We're all human. We all decide on these types of things sometimes. But then once I have my own time to
Mm-hmm.
process and look at it from different perspectives, I can then go back and revisit that conversation and say, hey, I'm actually looking at it differently now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm communicating that with somebody so they understand that my very first reaction wasn't from a place of looking at it from any other angle besides the red zone that I was in at the moment.
And I would like to point out right here that when we take responsibility, that is not a moment of weakness.
No.
That is absolutely a moment of strength and growth. So if you're giving yourself a hard time,
Mm-hmm.
I encourage you to practice letting that go and holding compassion for yourself as well.
Yeah. I say, in my opinion, I feel like you're a much stronger person to bring that about than you are to not bring that about and stay within the,
Mm-hmm.
I almost wanted to say the stubbornness because that's just my
Yeah.
default sometimes is stubborn. So
Well, that
yeah.
is, yeah, I been there, done that too. Woo!
Humanity.
So making the decision or zooming out, creating awareness, observing, and making the decision to create new patterns, communicating that you're creating new patterns,
Mm-hmm.
um, holding compassion for yourself and for others as you create these new patterns. And then what else?
And deciding on the feeling and the
Mm.
emotion that you want to experience and that you want those around you to experience with you. Because at the end of the day, we're co creating
Yeah.
all of our now moments and you have an impact to that. You can make choices
Mm-hmm.
and those choices are yours.
I'm going to read something that I wrote when we did the shifting perspectives episode, and I
Mm-hmm.
just thought that this was really important information, or at least it hit me really, really in the right spot today. Shifting perspectives is not about who is right or who is wrong. It's about coming together to try to understand one another so we can continue to support each other, love each other, and build each other up. On a larger scale, when we come together from a place of trying to absorb information purely for the purpose of understanding, we can begin to work better together in building a stronger, happier community and life. It's not about competition. It's
Mm,
about collaboration in co-creation and what we want to experience in this life.
it's so beautifully written. And by the way, she does really good blogs.
Mm.
Y'all should go to our website, lovealwaysself.com.
And check
And
out the journal tab.
yep, check out the journal tab to see the full write up from that episode.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Don't mind my dog behind me.
You know, and I think that there was another episode that we did recently on shifting timelines. And I think that
Mm,
this and that are related
absolutely.
because, as we talked about earlier, when we're able to zoom out and see what our choices will create as that butterfly effect, we can start to shift that timeline again, that reality that we're experiencing.
Right. Absolutely, we can. I keep also hearing, when you brought up timeline, especially, I keep hearing you still draw and you still pull from all of the potential
Mhm.
timelines that you're focused in on because they're all
Mhm.
still playing out. They're all still happening. There's just a multitude of all that going on. And so you can still draw from those experiences. And sometimes your emotions can be impacted by that. So it's just
Mhm.
up to you, again, as to which one you want to zoom in on.
Yeah. Which one do you want to give more energy to?
Right.
For sure. All righty, y'all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. Y'all have a great week now.
Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget, like, subscribe, follow for more. We really appreciate your support. It does help us grow. Um,
Leave a review
oh,
if you
yeah.
haven't done that already as well. So we appreciate those. It keeps our information coming forward to expand our audience so that more people get the love and support that we are providing through this medium.
So don't forget to love first
Love last.
and love always.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, listener, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us in this moment. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and we look forward to our next connection.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow to stay notified of new content from Love Always Self. If you have any questions or topics you'd like for us to discuss, please hit us up on any of our social media platforms linked in the show notes below.
I'm Karista.
And I'm Shyra.
And until next time, remember to love first
Love last
and love always. Love Always Self podcast is meant for entertainment purposes only. We do not make any warranties about the completeness, reliability, and accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. Any action you choose to take upon the information in this podcast is strictly done so at your own risk, and we will not be held liable for any losses and damages in connection with the use of our podcast. Any and all medical concerns should be addressed with a licensed healthcare provider, as well as any questions that may be derived from the information discussed in this podcast.